coming up on Arirang News. South Korean companies making batteries for electric vehicles are investing billions of dollars to expand their production. They're preparing to meet a surge in demand for EVs around the world. At the Olympics, South Koreans win bronze in badminton, their only medal in that sport this time around. A Korean gymnast will have a chance to win gold tonight in the men's vault, and the Korean baseball team are one step closer to defending their Olympic title, beating Israel again to go to the semifinals. And with another 1,200 new COVID-19 cases, South Korea has had more than 200,000 now since the pandemic began. The authorities are looking at what other measures they might have to take, with the spread of the virus refusing to slow down. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's electric vehicle battery makers are moving to expand their production capacity amid a spike in demand. They want to secure a more sustainable supply chain and slash manufacturing costs. Paeun-ji reports.
To meet the rising demand for electric vehicle batteries, South Korea's leading battery makers, including LG Energy Solution, SK Innovation, and Samsung SDI, are making large investments to expand their production capacity. The companies are trying to increase their in-house production of key components to secure a more stable supply chain and lower their manufacturing costs. SK Innovation recently announced it will increase its battery separator production capacity from 1.4 billion square meters to 4 billion square meters by 2025. To achieve this, the company said it will invest around $4.3 billion. Battery separators are one of the key components of lithium-ion batteries used in electric cars, as they prevent batteries from exploding while charging. Also, SK Innovation's battery material subsidiary SKIET is set to build 2 additional electric vehicle battery separator plants in Poland. Meanwhile, LG Chem plans to invest $5.2 billion by 2025. By the end of this year, the chemical firm plans to start building a battery plant with an annual production capacity of 60,000 tons in the southeastern city of Gumi. And it also plans to build another factory with a production capacity of 30,000 tons in the city of Cheongju. Samsung's battery maker, Samsung SDI, aims to raise its in-house production of cathodes, a key part of EV batteries, to 50% by 2023. It has also been building a cathode factory in the southeastern city of Pohang to start mass production next year. Paeun-ji, Arirang News.
Sales of electric cars in Korea soared in the second quarter to account for more than 4% of all domestic car sales for the first time. According to the Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association, from April to June, they were 4.2% of the market, beating the record set the quarter before of 2.9%. Eco-friendly cars sold well in other parts of the world, too. In the second quarter, electric cars and plug-in hybrids accounted for more than 15% of all sales in Europe and almost 12% in China. The South Korean stock market's seen one blockbuster IPO after another lately. Next Tuesday, one of the country's biggest game makers will be going public. That's Krafton, the company behind the smash hit PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Demand for shares is expected to be high, but some say the projected valuation means the company is way overpriced. Ji-young reports.
Retail investors can now bid for shares of one of South Korea's biggest game makers, Krafton. The public subscription for the game developer behind global blockbuster PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds opened for 2 days at 10 a.m. on Monday.
Krafton has created a new genre called Open World Battle Royale. Since 2017, this sensation has led to the sale of 75 million copies of the console and PC versions of PUBG, and it ranks 5th for the top-selling games of all time.
Ahead of its debut on the benchmark Kospi next Tuesday, Krafton has priced some 5.6 million new shares at 498,000 won, or around $432 each. That is at the high end of its proposed price range for its initial public offering. During the subscription, 25% of the new shares that the company is issuing will be distributed equally between those who have made at least the minimum deposit at 3 brokerage houses. To reserve a single share, investors have to deposit at least half the price of 10 shares. Some critics say the shares are overpriced because they put Krafton's valuation at around $21 billion, which is more than NC Soft, the biggest game developer listed in South Korea.
I didn't participate in the subscription for Crafton because of the relatively low competition rate among institutional investors. I also thought the IPO price is much higher than its true worth.
The public subscription for Krafton is the last time that retail investors in South Korea can submit multiple applications through different brokerage houses in a bid to get more shares in a big IPO.
An expert says although this is the last time for multiple applications, the competition is not as fierce as previous subscriptions.
The competition on the first day is falling short of those previous subscriptions, including KakaoBank or SKIT. The biggest reason for the overvaluation is that 90% of its sales are coming from only one game, PUBG.
Another expert says that as the price is already set aggressively, it's unlikely to see as dramatic price rises as previous IPOs. 엄지영, 아리랑 뉴스.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, good afternoon. Thanks for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Well, let's start with the U.S., where the price index for personal consumption rose in June by 3.5%, which is the highest since 1991. This figures, of course, into the inflation debate, and it's well above the Fed's target of 2%. What do you make of this data, Professor?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, the PCI, personal consumption index inflation was 4% over the last 12 months. The core PCI inflation, which excludes energy and food, was 3.5%, and that's the highest in quite a few years. But it actually came in slightly less than expected. Dow Jones survey had it at 3.6%. So it was slightly less than expected, and it was very much lower than consumer price index inflation that we saw a couple of weeks ago, which was 5.4% overall, and core CPI inflation was 4.5%. Now, if you look at the monthly figures, not the price changes over the last month, rather than last 12 months, it becomes more interesting. The core PCI inflation was 0.4% from May to June, and it's actually lower than where it was from April to May, which was at 0.5%, and it's lower than it was in April, which was 0.6%. So unlike the CPI inflation, which seems to be accelerating, the PCI core inflation seems to be decelerating. So it might be of interest to see what's the difference between the CPI inflation measure and the PCI inflation measure. There's three major differences. One, the weight of the goods that are calculated, what goods are included, how many. The CPI inflation is from the point of view of consumers. PCI inflation is from the point of view of sellers, so the weights differ. And then PCI includes consumer expenditures which consumers do not pay for directly. For example, medical insurance paid by the employer. And then the third difference is that CPI weights do not change, but PCI weights try to account for consumer substitutions where they try to substitute cheaper goods for more expensive goods. So the PCI inflation is usually lower. It reflects consumers' behavior a bit better than CPI inflation, and the PCI inflation does give some credence to the Fed's argument that this inflation may be temporary in nature. Now, the PCI does not go into very much details on what types of goods are accountable for how much of the price rise. But if you look back on the CPI inflation, we saw that 1/3 of the increase was actually driven by used cars, and that was probably because the new car production is limited right now because of the semiconductor shortage. So at least the PCI inflation does seem to show that inflation is not out of control, but there is a big wild card here. If the inflation is to return to normal inflation like the Fed argues, then the public expectation of inflation must stay the same. But many studies point out that the largest influence on how people think about future prices, what their price expectation is, depends on energy, especially on gasoline. And gasoline prices, whether you measure it by PCI or CPI, is increasing very quickly and very high, 12.5% by latest PCI measures. So that is a bit of a wild card on whether we can return to normal inflation.
Well, Professor, turning to the stock market, last Friday, Wall Street ended a little lower. Some disappointment with the earnings at Amazon and its outlook for the next quarter. There are other issues at play too, of course. What's the story in the global markets?
Okay, looking at last week as a whole, the market just shrugged off disappointing GDP second quarter growth measures. It came in lower than expected at 6.5%. Also, the job unemployment benefits, people who filed initial claims, were higher than expected. So there seems to be at least some argument to be made that the U.S. growth is slowing down, but the market basically just shrugged it off. For the month of July, Dow went up by 1.3%, S&P by 2.3%, NASDAQ by 1.2%. And while the major indices did fall on Friday, the pre-market opening for futures today show gains, 135 points for the Dow, 0.4% for S&P, 0.35% for NASDAQ. So at least for now, the market seems to be shrugging off whatever bad news there is and looking at the good news. The European market, the DAX was up and down, but around level trend last week. CAC and FTSE was up and down, but with an upward trend last week. And all three indices fell on Friday, but it is rising today by nearly 1% in very early trading. Asia, Nikkei, Shanghai, Hang Seng are all rising today. Nikkei had been on a downward trend last week, but there was a large increase today of 1.82%. Shanghai, it's been on an upward trend since Wednesday, and it went up by 1.97% today so far. They're not closed yet. Hang Seng also is not closed yet, but they've been on an upward trend since Tuesday, and they went up by 0.94% today.
Right, and in Korea, the Kospi's had a strong run for the past 8 months, especially. Right now, it's still hanging on to that 3,200-point level with a gain today. What's happening in the domestic market?
Okay, well, last week it had its ups and downs, but overall it fell, so it wasn't a good week. But the markets all rose today, though it has not recovered to Thursday's levels. It did not make up for the losses that we had on Friday. Kospi went up by 0.65% to 3,223.04. Kosdaq went up today by 0.65% to 1,037.80. It seems basically Kospi is doldrum because foreigners are on the net selling for the last couple of weeks. Why are the foreigners selling? Well, there are several reasons. First, coronavirus is rising in Korea and elsewhere, especially the Delta variant. There's a China risk. U.S. SEC is getting tougher on Chinese stock, and that is creating a possible risk in Chinese stock market and financial market, which seems to be having a fallout in Korean market as well. And then there is rising U.S. Fed taper risk. And then fourth, looking at the individual Korean stocks in the Kospi, it is highly divided. Half the stocks are gaining, half the stocks are losing. So it's very easy for the trend to turn around very quickly. And lastly, but it's not mentioned much by analysts, but I think this is very important. Korea is on track to raising the interest rates sometime this year, and that may be putting some fear into investors. I think a lot of them realize that it is the excess liquidity which is driving the market, and once the BOK raises its rates, there's a good possibility that the stock market will fall. So they're very nervous. They want to keep investing in the stock market, but they want to pull back quickly. So I think you're seeing a reflection from all that nervousness.
And Professor, briefly before we go, we'll have inflation data here in Korea this week, announcements also related to relief payments, and in the U.S., some key jobs data. What's on your radar in the week ahead?
Okay, well, on Wednesday, BOK announces July foreign currency reserves for Korea, and the Friday international payments account, including current accounts. And then in the U.S. and world economy, well, the biggest problems that are emerging so far is supply bottlenecks, concerns with U.S. labor supply, and freight transportation, not enough transportation for goods in international trade, and variables dealing with all of those are coming out next week. On Monday, U.S. ISM Purchasing Managers Index will give us some hints on supply bottlenecks. Friday, U.S. wage and employment data for July. And on Saturday, Chinese trade data. And Sunday, Chinese consumer price index data. That should give us some indications on these three problems that I just talked about.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much, as always, for sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, the latest from the Olympics in Tokyo. In badminton this afternoon, a pair of South Koreans beat another Korean team to win the bronze medal in the badminton women's double. That's Kim So-young and Kong Hee-young. They beat their opponents Lee So-hee and Shin Seung-chan 2-0. Kim and Kong are the only Koreans to win a medal in badminton at this Olympics. The last time the South Koreans took home badminton gold was in Beijing in 2008 when Lee Yong-dae and Lee Hyo-jung won the mixed doubles. In Olympic baseball, South Korea thrashed Israel this afternoon 11-1 to advance to the semifinals. The game was called in the 7th inning due to the 10-run mercy rule. Korea scored 7 of those runs in the 5th inning, including a 2-run homer from team captain Kim Hyun-soo. In the semifinals on Wednesday, they'll face the winner of tonight's game between the United States and Japan, which starts at 7. If Korea can win that game, they'll get a chance to defend their gold medal in the final on Saturday. And another medal chance for South Korea in artistic gymnastics, possibly gold in the men's vault. Shin Jae-hwan, the current world #1, qualified for the final with the best average score of 14.866. He's expected to go with the same routine in the final round. If he can perform as well as he has so far, he has a good chance of winning the gold in that event, which is at around 7 o'clock this evening. If he does, he'll cement his place as one of the South Korean gymnastics greats with Yang Hak-sun, who won gold on the vault in 2012. South Korea has now recorded more than 200,000 cases of COVID-19 since the pandemic began. That figure was surpassed today. Officials say this week will be key to deciding what extra measures might need to be taken to contain the fourth wave, which is showing little sign of slowing down. Also, seniors who missed their chance to sign up for a vaccine can now book online again. Choi Won-jong reports.
The total number of COVID-19 infections in South Korea has exceeded 200,000. With 1,219 new cases reported on Monday. Due to the more transmissible Delta variant sweeping across the country, the nation reached this unwanted milestone, just 4 months after it hit 1,000 mark in April. On Monday's daily tally, all but 69 were locally transmitted, with 65% of cases reported from the greater Seoul area. The health authority said daily infections in the capital area have slowed down little compared to the previous week. But for the rest of the country, daily cases are still on the rise.
The average of daily cases outside the capital region is 546.1 people, which is higher than the previous week, mostly from Busan, Gyeongsangnam-do Province, and Daejeon.
The authorities also said that those aged 20 to 39 have been showing the highest rate of infections among all age groups in the past 2 weeks. And if current social distancing measures don't stop the surge of cases, the authorities will take additional measures. Meanwhile, the government is working to speed up its vaccination drive. People over 75 who missed their vaccination slot can make the reservation at any time. And those aged 60 for 74 can book their jabs until the end of this month. 최원정, Arirang News.
And South Korea is on track to have given first vaccine shots to 36 million people by the end of September. Speaking in a meeting with his top aides on Monday, President Moon Jae-in said the government will do all it can to speed up vaccinations and reassured the public that there will be no problem in terms of vaccine supply.
내일이면 1차 접종이 2천만 명을 넘게 될 것입니다. 9월까지 3,600만 명에 대한 1차 접종을 마친다는 계획도 차질 없이 진행되고 있습니다. 목표를 앞당겨 추석 연휴 전까지 목표를 달성하고자 합니다.
The Chuseok holiday week starts this year on September 18th. President Moon noted that vaccine reservations will start next week for some 17 million people aged 40 and under, and he called on officials to check the system so that the process goes smoothly and everyone gets a fair chance. The president acknowledged that there's still a lot we don't know about the virus, but it's without a doubt, he said, that vaccines can reduce the severity of the illness and the fatality rate, and he called for active participation. Last week, South and North Korea restored their communication lines in a sign that relations might improve. Now, Kim Yo-jung, the sister of the North Korean leader, is urging the South to suspend its regular military drills with the U.S., which are scheduled to start in 2 weeks. South Korea is not committed to any such move, but says it will try to ensure that the drills don't raise tensions. Kim Da-mi reports.
Seoul's Unification Ministry said on Monday that the restoration of communication channels between the two Koreas is a starting point to rebuilding trust between Seoul and Pyongyang. This in response to the North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jung's warning on Sunday for the South to call off its annual summertime military exercises with Washington.
Seoul will take its time to gradually revitalize inter-Korean dialogue, starting with the restoration of the two Koreas' communication channels.
While refusing to comment on Kim's warning, South Korea's defense ministry said on Monday that no details about the upcoming drills, such as their size or type, have been decided yet, and that Seoul is closely negotiating on the matter with Washington. A Pentagon spokesperson also reiterated Washington's position on Sunday that any decision on the drills will be made through consultation between South Korea and the U.S. The latest comments from Seoul and Washington come a day after Kim Yo-jung said that Pyongyang will closely watch to see whether the South will again carry out its, quote, hostile war exercise or make a bold decision to scrap it. But Sunday's statement is quite different to her last warning in March when she threatened to scrap the inter-Korean military agreement over the drills, as this time the warning has not been made public to the North Korean people.
The restoration of the line was not publicized in the Rodong-Sinmun newspaper, so a statement also was not issued because it might confuse the North Korean people.
With the regime shrugging off the possibility of another inter-Korean summit, experts say there are no good incentives for the U.S. to pull the plug on the exercises. There are some who insist it'll be difficult to postpone the drills any further due to the upcoming transition of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. For now, it's highly likely the drills will go ahead, but they will be scaled down in the light of the pandemic. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
4 South Korean fishermen and a foreign member of their crew kidnapped in waters off West Africa were released on Sunday, around 2 months after they were abducted. Officials at Seoul's foreign ministry say the Koreans are in good condition and are being protected ahead of their return home. They were kidnapped in June, apparently by pirates near the Gulf of Guinea. The officials say another kidnapping in the same region has also been resolved. That one involved 1 Korean and 4 foreign crew members abducted in May and released in late June. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.